Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Homi Kharas. I'm a senior fellow in the Center for Sustainable Development at the Brookings Institution, and I'm here with my colleagues Izumi Ohno, former director of the JICA Ogata Research Institute in Japan, and John McArthur, director of our center, to introduce our new edited volume of essays on breakthroughs in sustainable development. Before we get started, let me say that this is the 6th volume on topics related to sustainable development that we've produced in partnership with the JICA Research Program. It's a wonderful partnership that's now over 10 years old. We value it enormously. JICA, as an agency that executes development programs around the world, brings a wealth of field-based experience that complements our own scholarship. So to get things rolling, we'll start with a brief video from the Director General of the JICA Ogata Research Institute, Mr. Koji Makino. Koji, I might add, was my co-editor in the very first volume we did together a decade ago, so I'm especially delighted to welcome him to this event. Let's hear from DG Makino.
Hi, Homi. How have you been since I met you last time face-to-face? Eminent scholar and friends, thank you indeed for your participation. This is Koji Makino, Director General, JICA Ogata Research Institute in Japan. In early 21st century, the world has a clear but too strict rules of international aid under the Paris Declaration. Theoretically, Paris Declaration is right, yes, but it didn't work effectively on the ground, actually. We threw a big stone into Busan Declaration next to Paris to change the game by our first book, Catalyzing Development. I'd like to note Brookings Institution and JICA kept a very strategic partnership with over a decade in such a way from the beginning, and we could produce 6 world influential books. Today is an excellent occasion to launch 6 masterpiece breakthroughs between 2 agencies and by authors. Congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those sentiments, Koji. So our program this morning will run as follows. After an introduction from Izumi and myself, we'll show you a brief collage of what is in the several chapters of the book, just to whet your appetite. I hope you'll appreciate that we've moved well beyond the economics profession to include real scientists, businessmen, investors, activists, and other voices into the volume. Later, you can download and read electronic PDFs of any of the chapters on our website, which you will find posted in the chat. We'll use the last half hour of our meeting for a panel discussion that our other co-editor, John McArthur, will moderate with 3 of our wonderful authors. During that, John will take questions from you that you can submit by emailing events@brookings.edu or tweeting using the hashtag #breakthroughdevelopment. Okay, let's get started. Izumi, when we launched this project, I remember we were feeling that business as usual wouldn't be enough to achieve the sustainable development goals, and we started to wonder whether there really were technologies that could be applied during this decade of action. I have to say that reading the various chapters has made me far more optimistic about the prospects for significant technological breakthroughs, not just in terms of the advancement of new science, like we saw with the development of vaccines, but also in terms of how applications are exploding and how entire systems are being disrupted and permitting leapfrogging to new solutions. So what surprised you most from the contributions? Unmute, Izumi.
Thank you, Homi. Yeah. This book, A Breakthrough, is a natural follow-up to our previous book, Leave No One Behind, which highlighted the importance of translating SDGs' bold global commitment into concrete actions to support specific people in specific places who are facing specific problems. I think there are 2 happy surprises for me. The first, The book presents wide-ranging frontier technologies to address the challenges we put previously, such as deep poverty traps, universal health coverage, food insecurity, conflicts and refugees, cities, access to finance and cash transfer, especially for women. In addition, the book has tried to address the challenges to climate and also nature conservation. The second, the contributor of this book are dedicated professionals with diverse background, ranging from social entrepreneurs and venturists to development practitioners and researchers engaged in innovation-specific technologies. So these lineups show that harnessing technology for a better future is a widely shared vision and driving a lot of capable, willing professionals to act. It also gives a possibility of building broad partnerships and creating networks in connected areas.
You know, one of my sense of the perhaps the biggest message of the book is that it's one of hope. You know, it's quite easy to get depressed about the current development landscape, and we see COVID-induced recessions and lockdowns and fiscal stresses and debt crises and plunging investment and restricted mobility, climate-related disasters, and now inflation, conflict, and hunger in developing countries. So it's clear that there's a lot of pain in the world. But our authors feel that we might be able to move ahead to a far better world in just 10 years. What do you see as being the biggest issues that technology can help with?
Well, it's a bit difficult to single out one biggest threat because the challenges are so diverse and complex and extensive. Of course, the speed of vaccine and drug development and also their fair access to the developing countries are the pressing issues now. The pandemic never ends unless the whole world becomes safe and healthy. At the same time, addressing the COVID-induced crisis is not enough to build a better future. For many countries, the pandemic is an accelerator of the existing or pre-COVID problem. So we need to tackle fundamental challenges or structural problems with sustainability, inclusiveness, and resilience in mind. So in this regard, our authors have shown various frontier technologies which contribute to, for example, fall in the cost of renewable energy, digitalized payment system for inclusive business and cash transfer, smart and resilient cities, agri-tech and biotech, and satellite technology for monitoring forest conservation, prediction of natural disaster and targeted approach to humanitarian assistance by AI and machine learning, and so on. Personally, I was so impressed with the interspecies money, which I think Jonathan is going to talk about, to protect the nature. This is like a Copernican revolutionary idea where that the non-humans, like animal and species, become a financial and communicate with their preference of nature conservation to human by using digital tools.
Izumi, that's a lot of very good news, and there's so much in this volume. Now, one thing I've really learned from the volume is that technological change is a fairly complicated thing to predict, especially over a 10-year horizon. And none of the technologies and applications described here have proceeded in a linear fashion. They've each had significant advances and setbacks, and you know, we've gone through these pendulum swings of hype and failure. And sometimes we divide people up into techno-optimists and techno-pessimists, but I think anyone reading this collection will end up as a techno-realist, understanding that some things do become possible thanks to new technologies and applications, but equally understanding that technology is not a silver bullet for any problem. And you've mentioned several times the importance of being humble with respect to our understanding of technology. What do you mean by that?
Well, regardless of how powerful, technology alone is not enough. It must be embedded in the community and society of users. This is a message I'm getting from various authors, especially from Mei Chan, who wrote the last chapter. Actually, she's a CEO of Candid, and also she had a wonderful experience of the USAID's Global Development Lab. So we must be humble and understand the limitation of the frontier technology while leveraging their power to a fuller extent. This is because technology adoption is highly dependent on economic, regulatory, and social factors. So we should avoid deploying the latest technology for the sake of technology. Rather, we should focus on how aspect than the what. So this calls for humility and deep understanding and appreciation of the local context and underlying drivers of the problem we aim to address. So book has a various example, Liberia responded to the COVID by using existing public health tools and trusted health workers. Senegal's farm groups becoming the owner of operator and a shared solar system for scaling up. In Ethiopia's low-cost solution for COVID included the use of community radio to provide life-saving information. So we should understand what worked on the ground as well.
Right. So at the end of the day, I think one thing that does stand out in the book is that there is actually so much we can do to accelerate the advancement and deployment of new technologies in developing countries. And part of this is obviously the transition to digitization. And one silver lining to the COVID response, I think, is the shot in the arm it's given to digital transformations, even in some of the poorest countries in the world. But I think another underappreciated aspect of the action that's needed is to expand the space of dialogue about technological transformation with ordinary citizens. We all talk about governance of technology, and I think what's interesting is that the chapters in our book spend some time giving examples about what this means in practice. So, Izumi, any last thoughts on the action that might be inspired by this book?
Okay, so let me share maybe two final thoughts. The first is a need for holistic approach and building networks and platform for ecosystemic changes so that the frontier technology can be scaled up for wider application. This requires engagement of various stakeholders locally, regionally, and globally, including regulatory bodies, business, community people, and citizens. And then second, ethics and governance, data governance. For example, the use of AI for crisis prevention mitigation has a potential for reducing suffering damages caused by various disasters such as natural disasters, pandemic, and food insecurity, etc., and also man-made conflict. But digital payment platform and smart cities could also serve as a transformational infrastructure. But to realize their benefit, it is important to ensure that the system be used responsibly and also safeguarded. We should not only invest in data quality and coverage, but also launch feedback platforms that take result-based learning seriously and strengthen data ethics standard in governance framework.
Well, thank you so much, Izumi, and for the rest of the audience. I hope this gives you some background on our book. Now what we'd like to do is just hear from our authors about the breakthrough they've written about.
I'm Pardis Sabetti.
And I'm Yolanda Bacilodevico.
And today we would like to give a brief overview of our chapter, Breakthrough Technologies for Pandemic Preparedness. COVID-19 has exposed gaps in public health systems worldwide and intensified inequalities everywhere. No country was fully prepared for this crisis, despite countless warnings from scientists. And nearly 2 years later, we are still fighting against it.
Our chapter focuses on two distinct pillars that can help us end COVID-19 and prevent the next pandemic. First, biomedical and genomic advancements have enabled us to build a range of detection, treatment, and prevention tools. Second, new information technologies have enabled scientists to work together with public health and communities to track and respond to infections within a population. But several barriers remain that continue to complicate implementation of these advances across the globe. To overcome these challenges, we need more coordination across global public health infrastructure. We need an integrated strategy for equity and community empowerment, and we need sustainable financing built on rapidly scaled domestic and international investments across all countries.
Hi, Zachary Bogue, co-founder and managing partner of DCVC, an early-stage deep tech venture capital fund. First, a huge compliment to my fellow co-authors on this book. I'm really excited to be included here with you all. The breakthrough I want to tell you about is that deep tech is currently radically transforming our global food and agricultural system. These are deep tech approaches like synthetic biology, advanced robotics, AI-enabled data analytics platforms, as well as satellites in orbit. It's our moral imperative that these technologies are broadly distributed and adopted globally to make sure we can equitably feed everyone on the planet by boosting yields, reducing waste, and increasing visibility. The upshot of these technologies is they will help us reduce our environmental footprint and ameliorate the impacts of climate change as we transform our often antiquated global food and agricultural systems. Thank you.
Industrialization and economic growth was fueled with energy, lots of it. Coal, oil, gas provided the means for electric power, for transportation, for materials. For the rural poor, energy also enabled fertilizer, irrigation, processing, storage. But this transition has eluded the poor, several billion of them actually. And the question is whether the breakthrough in low-cost, affordable solar power, even without storage, even without batteries, even without large transmission grids, can that offer an additional choice to the poor to use low-cost power during the daytime, at least for the chores, businesses, agriculture that could be powered during the daytime. We show how our experience in the Sahel made this possible and saw a very high uptake of such daytime low-cost power.
My breakthrough is a new central bank formulated along the lines of the Bank for International Settlements. This bank would be constituted to be owned and governed on behalf of non-human life on Earth. We call this bank the Bank for Other Species. The purpose of the bank is to hold very large-scale finance for the preservation and regeneration of diverse life forms on Earth into the 22nd century, and also to develop innovative interspecies money mechanism whereby value can be held where it's necessary to be held by wild animals, by trees, plants, and insects, and that value it can be dispersed on to often very poor local communities who live proximate to those life forms in return for reliable observation of them, and sometimes even for new and innovative interspecies services.
We cannot achieve many SDGs without better crisis response. In the last 2 decades, natural disasters claimed over 1 million lives, organized violence took nearly 1 million more, and tens of millions are forcibly displaced each year. By 2030, over 2/3 of the world's poor will live in fragile countries. The last 2 decades have also witnessed exponential growth in crisis data sources such as satellites and cell phones. Our chapter explores breakthroughs applying machine learning to improve crisis response, like the EU's rapid flood forecasting system and the UN's anticipatory disaster financing efforts.
In conflict prevention and mitigation, machine learning can improve how policymakers monitor and anticipate new crises. Once a crisis has unfolded, machine learning offers the ability to 1, improve how we effectively and efficiently target and allocate resources, 2, determine what intervention people get to maximize impact, and 3, deliver services through new platforms. Leveraging AI can accelerate our progress towards the SDGs. Harnessing its transformational impact, however, requires creating the conditions conducive for success, sustainability, and scale.
The traditional agriculture sector in emerging markets is being transformed by digital technologies and can be viewed from the lean startup lens of think big, act fast, start small. Agri-tech is the use of digital technology to improve agriculture yields and profitability for the smallholder farmers. Emerging markets such as Indonesia has a dynamic and vibrant agri-tech ecosystem in 5 key business models: farmers advisory, peer-to-peer lending, traceability, digital marketplace, and mechanization. Ultimately, the combination of agri-tech and business models, data and analytics, and strategic public-private partnership can help unlock the full potential of digital technologies in emerging markets for agriculture transformation to achieve food security.
Hello everyone, my name is Morita. This chapter jointly written by Okonogi and Yamada and focused on deforestation. The tropical deforestation has been a global concern, and recently in the COP26, more than 100 world leaders have promised to end deforestation by 2030. Why we have been failing to slow deforestation so far? One of the main reasons is cloud in the tropics. Most of the year, the tropical forest is covered by cloud, and conventional optical satellite cannot identify forest change in rainy season. The breakthrough is radar satellite. This satellite can penetrate the cloud and monitor forest change through a year. We expect this technology would be a step to stop illegal logging and contribute to strengthen forest governance.
Hi, my name is Tomoyuki Naito. I wrote Chapter 9, Redefining the Smart City for Sustainable Development. Unfortunately, the effects of COVID-19 infection have been lasting for 2 years and have severe implications for our lives, especially urban life. What kind of smart city is needed in the future? There is no longer a need for a smart city trade fair to showcase elemental technologies. The will of the citizen should first exist, therefore what? As a good practice to control pandemic, China was first to popularize the smartphone app Health Code. However, this is not all purpose. Breakthrough cannot be made only with a smartphone app. The breakthrough can be brought by combining visionary technology with good governance and citizen-level collaboration. I hope the readers can enjoy reading this chapter to consider what breakthrough thinking should require for the city to function truly smart. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tomaika Tilleman. I wrote my chapter on how digital systems will reshape the future of money and development. Open source digital payment networks could not only revolutionize the financial sector, but also provide a foundation for whole of society digital transformation. The same technologies that enable frictionless, trusted financial transactions will also help unlock solutions to public corruption, digital identity verification, social benefits delivery, clean power markets, and even trusted voting. Built correctly, these systems could reinvent the toolbox that government, the private sector, and civil society use to solve public problems.
Hi, my name is Bright Simmons. 2 facts are defining our world today. Fact 1, every social problem is interconnected with every other social problem, and the solutions to these problems are themselves interconnected and interdependent too. Fact 2, every social problem will be caused by and solved by technology. That is why in my breakthrough chapter, I'll be taking you on a journey across Africa through a number of case studies, revealing a new type of systems entrepreneurship called transmediation, and explaining why transmediation is the only key to unlocking the solutions that can deal with these interconnected and interdependent problems.
While technology breakthroughs are essential to bend the curve of progress and enable us to achieve the SDGs, they aren't sufficient in and of themselves. In fact, as we've seen time and time again, adopting technology for technology's sake rarely results in the transformation we seek. To achieve meaningful breakthroughs, we need to focus at least as much on how we apply frontier technologies as what technologies we employ. That means starting by falling in love with the problem, not the solution. Then using proven design methodologies such as deeply listening to the needs of affected communities, validating our assumptions, and building in rapid feedback loops that enable us to quickly learn and adapt. It also turns out that many much older technological advances have yet to reach billions of those who could benefit, particularly in the low-resource countries where needs are the greatest. Simply expanding access and effectively leveraging basic technologies such as mobile phones and the internet can in many cases be transformative. The breakthrough we need most is a new approach to innovation, not simply another technology.
What a terrific synopsis. Thank you so much to the team who pulled that together and to all our authors, most importantly. I'm John McArthur, Director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Brookings and co-editor along with Izumi and Homi of this terrific volume. Everyone just got a sense of the range of topics being covered here, from food business to the science of food systems to deforestation to pandemic avoidance and even interspecies technology and interspecies communication through finance, but also to reveal preferences of what different species want. These are pretty big and in some cases for me mind-blowing technologies, and I'm pretty excited that we're going to have a panel now to talk about some of the issues in more depth. We do refer our audience to the online book. All the chapters are freely available online. We're very grateful to our colleagues at Brookings Press for helping to make this all possible, but every chapter can be downloaded and the print versions will be available for pre-order as well. With that, I think we do have one small glitch that's come up in that our friend Jonathan Ledgerd, I think, has just been returning from travel in rural Africa and might not have made it back to an online connection for this. So unfortunately, Jonathan isn't here, but I'm thrilled that we're joined by colleagues Leslie Go and Bright Simons, who are two of our other phenomenal contributors. You just heard them each speak briefly about their chapters. This is a chance for us to get into a little more deep dive about their chapters, but also I think some of the intersections and interconnections that come up across this volume. So if I will just, if you permit, I will introduce Leslie and Bright, while I'll also ask the team if they could please just put up the list of chapters on the screen, just so we can see how they fit in. There are two slides. The first one you see everyone from our introductory chapter to the sequence of authors you saw in the video. And then maybe on the second slide, you'll see where Leslie and Bright's chapters fit in. So Leslie has authored a terrific piece on how agritech is transforming traditional agriculture in emerging markets. Think big, act fast, and start small. Leslie is pretty uniquely qualified to talk about this. She's a senior technology advisor and former chief technology officer at the World Bank Group. She's also a board member of Singapore GovTech and fellow at the Cambridge Center for Alternate Finance. She's brings together a lot of the very frontier technology and digital issues, but also a lot of the practical development insights around how to operationalize things. So we're extremely excited to get your views, Leslie. Bright Simons, who you just heard, has drafted it's chapter 11 or written, created a terrific and I think expansive approach I'm really keen for us to get into on a short story of transmediary platforms. Transmediary and transmediation is a word I had not heard before Bright sent us his first draft, and it's a very compelling concept that I'm looking forward to him explaining to us here. Bright is president of M Pedigree, a social enterprise that works on 3 continents with governments, major companies, and activists to safeguard human health and food security using technology, especially digital technology. Bright is a entrepreneur in spirit and practice in every sense of the word, innovating in so many ways. And at one point a few years ago was named as one of Fortune's 50 world greatest leaders, recognizing the range of his contributions. So we're so interested to get your joint perspectives here, Leslie and Bright, on everything from the practicality of the breakthroughs that you see in front of us to really the risks, the implications, and even what might a broader vision of success look like. I think that the two of you are interested, and it's interesting in your chapters at the interface between agriculture and food in particular and digital technologies and how those are coming together to transform opportunities for food systems. But the insights that you have, I think, are beyond food in particular. They're a lot about businesses and even social actors and how they interconnect. So maybe, Leslie, we did just hear about your chapter in your nice minute. Thank you so much. But would love to get your sense maybe to start of what's the essence of think big, act fast, start small. And your chapter does talk about China, Kenya, the US, Indonesia, all these different locations. What's the essence of that think big, act fast, start small?
Thank you so much, John. First, I'm grateful for the leadership from Izumi, Homi, and yourself for bringing us all together on this particular book that meant a lot to me, especially on the nexus of technology and policy. In the work that I'm doing at the World Bank and in academia and sitting on a few boards, advising key stakeholders on the use of digital technology and how do we apply that, especially in a lot of challenges that we're dealing with, climate, pandemic, and so forth. And the way I'm approaching this chapter is how do we look at the problem in SDG goals systemically and understanding how do we apply technology in a meaningful way that will bring in private sector, government, stakeholder, and various ecosystem players to build it from the ground up and also to leverage the use of technology and availability of technology in a way that will help us radically transform the SDG outcome. And we also applied a lot of these thinkings on the ground to make it real. Let's say Indonesia as an example. After writing the chapter, I proposed the concept of putting together this data hackathon to operationalize the idea of use of data and technology to bring about the multi-stakeholder partnership that finds synergies from private sector and the young innovators in Indonesia to co-create with government. And through such strategic partnership, we realize how the opportunities for catalyzing innovation and how do we reimagine what is the possibility that data could unlock, and then very quickly come out with some of these ideas that could then realize some of the visions and solving some of the challenges in food security areas in Indonesia as an example. Now, Indonesia is not the only one, and I quoted a few others. In Kenya, what we've learned on the work in Kenya also help us think through how do we bring fintech and agtech together to strengthen the solution of intersections from these two sectors. And if you want to talk about scale, China agriculture innovation is a phenomenal example of how do you bring, let's say, 850 million users connected with 60 million farmers. That is a great breakthrough in itself. And so we could learn from all these examples, how do we create that ecosystem using technology as the enabler and driver for these digital ecosystem and digital economy with the help of the multi-host stakeholder partnership. So that's what my chapter is focusing on. And I'm delighted that it's finally published. And I hope that this will also catalyze more thinking in this space and help us solve this problem around the world, because this is by no means an easy one.
And I look forward to learning from others as well. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And just as a reminder to our audience to submit questions to the panel, you can either post a tweet on Twitter with the hashtag breakthrough development, hashtag breakthrough development, or send an email to events@brookings.edu. And we'll try to save some time here to answer questions, especially if you have any for Leslie and Bright. Right, I want to channel Jonathan for a moment, as we had discussed prior to this, because he is bringing together a lot of threads, as Leslie just did, but currencies, new forms of digitization or digitalization that allow us to think differently about the possibilities of how to connect literally species in a new way, and revealed preference through AI-based technologies. It calls to question everything, or our premises on everything from whose opinion matters to how we store value in the world between different actors. You've thought so much about how actors and their relationships connect and how they change. I'm wondering if you can, for our audience, explain a little bit about transmediation and what it means and how it fits into these broader issues that Leslie's just raised, and what breakthroughs really need to entail. Off mute, you're on mute still, Bright, our 21st century challenge.
Sorry about that. So like Leslie, I'm also delighted and grateful for the opportunity given by Brookings, yourself, Homi, Izumi, and JICA to make this possible. Some of the ideas are ideas that have influenced my work for many, many years. And this opportunity created a very interesting set of conditions for me to crystallize them. So I'm very grateful. So I'm one part social entrepreneur and another part technologist. So my chapter is a narrative, which is why I had to use a story format to try and convey some of these really complex vistas that we are seeing in our work. So let's start with the technology concept itself, because to get to transmediation, that is the journey that I went. A quick way of describing what a technology is to call it a system that produces quick and precise responses to a defined problem. We can start with the problem piece. So quick and precise responses to a problem. We can start with the problem piece and say that in the context of the SDGs, we are talking about social problems. So I'll give you a quick story. In 1665, London was in the midst of a plague. So very familiar, the bubonic pandemic, which had happened for many, many, many centuries, was in its last phase. And social planners were of the view that animals were responsible for causing it. And they thought dogs and cats were more likely the culprits. So the king ordered that they should wipe out the dogs and cats, as many of them as they could find. And about 240,000 dogs and cats were massacred. It's a huge massacre of dogs and cats. The social planners were right. Animals were implicated, but they got the wrong animal. The right animal was the rats. It was rodents that were spreading the bubonic plague. And by killing the dogs and the cats, the rodents ran amok. They had free rein to run amok, and the disease exacerbated. The reason I bring this up is unintended consequences, of course, but the fact that problems tend to be interconnected. And because problems are interconnected, solutions that misdiagnose the problem's boundaries, not just the problem itself, but its boundaries, tend to fail. That means that we have to consider problems as interconnected. And therefore, the connectedness of a solution becomes an important benchmark. If you're evaluating a solution, you say, is it connected enough? What that means is that is it connected to other solutions so that when there are secondary and tertiary effects, those other solutions can kick in. Now, very often we don't appreciate how much technology itself as a kind of solution system has evolved. So you take the car, and everybody knows the automobile, and we know there are 30,000 components in the automobile. The average car manufacturer has about 200 suppliers. They collaborate to create a car. But then once they finish collaborating, you have that car, that automobile as a solution, we tend to treat it as a discrete object, and its impact on society is then treated as discrete. When you take the self-driving car, which is a form of modern technology, the emerging technology, the dynamic is very different. In a self-driving car, it's not just about many collaborators creating one car. It's about the fact that today, to do a good self-driving car, You need to connect to multiple systems to make the technology emergent. So we are talking about satellite systems, APIs into algorithms about safety. So to give you an example, you as the manufacturer will not encounter all the conditions under which pedestrian safety will be implicated. So you need other people's data sets in order to ensure that when your car meets something it's not familiar with, it can navigate. That means you need APIs connected to multiple algorithms. Now, that fact, I think, brings the key point into perspective. Technology is no longer something that is already created, which then impacts society. Technology is something that is in continuous creation, which makes it therefore an interplay between power, because all relations are relations of power, and then the passion of those who are creating these systems. So the whole point of transmediation is that very few social enterprises with discrete solutions are useful in a world where all the problems are connected. That requires a new kind of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs who are not just intermediators, but transmediaries. And these transmediaries connect the different parts of the ecosystem to generate a solution. And in technology, that is no longer something you can choose to do. All the platforms that are going to be important are going to be platforms that are hyper-connected, and they're going to be built by transmediaries. So that is the general summary of my chapter.
It's amazing. And I think the creative narrative approach captures so much in your chapter, right? But one of the things that really struck me is this notion of a difference between a social enterprise as someone that connects between between nodes in a network. It's kind of a brokering function for that precise problem solving. And a transmediary being an actor that reorganizes the nodes of the network. So they shift in their relationship across the network because of this connective tissue. I'm curious, Leslie, with your, call it, business mindset for how companies and ventures can take these types of problems on. How does this resonate with you, as whether it's in the field of food systems or more broadly as a fellow technologist? I think it's the right term for both of you. How do you see these kind of systems questions aligning with the enterprise level questions?
Thank you. And those are great points that you brought up, right? And John, that's an excellent question to bring about these kind of shift in thinking. Because a lot of the work I'm dealing with are very deeply seated in so many multi-dimension. And it's not just one sector. And that's the reason why in my chapter, I mentioned about the fintech revolution and bringing along the agtech transformation as well. And it also requires us to think more holistically about not just the positive effect of technology, but also some of the unintended consequence. And I work very deeply in the space on data, and data can also be used and misused as well, right? So as much as I propose the use and practical use of technology and data in boosting the digital economy, I also think about what are the areas where it can potentially cause harm. So as part of the World Economic Forum on Global Future Council on Data Policy, I also contributed to a piece called Pathways to Digital Justice, where we look at the victim's point of view and think more holistically about the interconnectedness that Bright so eloquently talk about, and how this in the digital space, when harm is happening to the victim, how would you then be able to look into the redressability and also the effect on society at large, and looking at data governance, responsible use of data, data protections for the citizens and consumers at large. And so, look, and this creativity and ability to shift towards this interconnected world also requires us to raise our social contract to bring about greater harmony and protection of everyone, and creating a more equitable environment for all.
I'm just looking, we have a couple of questions that were sent in advance of this. Maybe if our colleagues in the back end of this have anything, please, we'll turn to those soon if anything else is coming in while we're talking. But One question that came in, I think, is relevant to the global universal challenge of this, and it's something that someone named Matt Bogosian from the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative raised, is just please describe the importance of developing meaningful and more comprehensive metrics and dashboards that communities can use to select the smartest interventions that advance key technologies most likely to accelerate sustainable development. So there is this question of, you do what you measure, or collectives tend to, work towards the measured outcome or output. Maybe Bright, how do you think about how communities can track or measure these types of issues in order to prioritize?
No, that's a brilliant question. And I think in my chapter, as you recall, I had a lot of difficulty trying to simplify these metrics and gauges. It's like, how do you gauge a technology? And we came up with a number of concepts, and eventually I think we have something that is somewhat translatable. So one of them is obviously to start to measure the connectedness of a technology. I'm often surprised that even practitioners in technology don't recognize the extent to which most technologies now are dependent on other technologies for core functions. So because most technologies are now dependent on other technologies for core functions, a technology's ability to be interoperable should now be considered a primary benchmark for success, regardless of what type of technology it is. It doesn't matter if you're making a technology that is very simple and is meant for a rural part of Uganda, or you're building really high-tech and deep-tech stuff in Canada, in the Atlantic Maritimes. The truth is that technology going to be able to interconnect with other technologies, because it will not be able to solve any problem on its own. So that's one important one, and I think I've already mentioned that. The second is to figure out what are the other issues that the technology is precipitating, and how well is the technology able, in that kind of respect, to adapt. So I'll give you an example. When I built, with my colleagues, of course, and with a team, we built mPedigree. We thought that we had the problem well defined, the problem of counterfeit products. If you walk into a shop, a pharmacy in those days in Nigeria, and you pick up a drug for malaria, you had 8 in 10 chances or 1 in 5 chances that what you were going to, 4 in 5 chances. You have 4 in 5 chances that what you were picking could harm you. So let's say your child has malaria, you walk into a pharmacy, you want to buy medicine, you had 4 in 5 chances in those days, in those early days, that what you pick will actually do more harm to your child. So we were convinced that this was a problem of falsification, and we should create some solution that will let the consumer just know. It turned out that it was much more complex along many dimensions, but I'll mention only 2. One was that when it comes to outright fakes, as in outright copies, it's not more than maybe 2%, depending on where you are, to about 10% of the problem. The bigger problem was that even the original manufacturer, depending on where they were selling the medicines, due to regulatory defects, may be selling substandard products. So even if you collaborate with the manufacturer to introduce a technology for the consumer to verify, you're not doing anything more than creating false confidence, which meant we needed to now collaborate with the regulator so that the process of ensuring that the medicine is good is not just merely about the copies of the medicine not being in the market, but the medicine that is purportedly made by the original manufacturer also being effective and efficacious. So now we needed to change the model. Then we discovered eventually that, if you tell consumers to check, some pharmacists take that as an affront because they have a trusted relationship with the consumer. Now he walks into my shop, and rather than talking to me, he has this device in their hand trying to figure out if the medicine is good. What has that got, how does that impact my professional standing as a pharmacist? So we had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out pharmacists. If we had not designed the technology as a transmediary platform, we would not have been able to evolve it, given the mindset we had that we had already diagnosed the problem. It was merely a technical quick fix. Take digital money, which a lot of people now are trying to make the cost of transactions low enough so we can have financial inclusion. The more frictionless you make it, the more you raise other problems such as anti-money laundering related issues or counter financial terrorism or finance of terrorism related issues. How do you solve that kind of problem? You need not merely to create digital cash, you also need to create interconnected systems so regulators can play a role and others can play a role. That, however, creates an issue of power. And in my subsequent comments, I hope to describe how then we can empower technologists to be able to do this kind of work. Thank you.
That's great. And I do have to mention Tamika Tillman has a great chapter on digital financial systems as a revolution. There's a great line in the chapter that if one were to come up with a secure form of financing for a global system, it would not be cash. And so how does one shift to, you know, the true technologies that are becoming available in that underpinning, but also transmediary way? We have another question, and we only have about 9 minutes left in the hour, so we're gonna have to be a bit tight here, but I want to also flag, I'd love to come back on some of the risk questions, because a lot of people are worried about technology, and I think each of you has important insights on that. But just quickly before that, we have a question from Tusakat saying, thank you to both Leslie and Bright, and wondering, and maybe it's a question for you, Leslie, in the first instance, similarly to how data hackathons include local talent and perspective, do you have any thoughts on the opportunity and space for youths to participate in this new tech-led ecosystem? What are your thoughts on how youth can best engage?
Thank you for the question. In fact, the data hackathon was to really engage the young innovators in a more immersive way together with the government and at the national and subnational level. In the case of Indonesia, the government actually designed programs for the young farmers called millennial farmers to bring about the new generation of farmers to make farming cool again, so to speak. And the whole idea is that there has been a lot of studies that many of the farmers are aging population, a more traditional way of applying the same old methods for growing of food in not just Indonesia, many countries around the world. And so how could we think about new ways of engaging the youth in such a way that will get them to want to partake in this agriculture space, and we call them digital agriculture or agri-tech, and not just on the farm, because many folks think farming is so laborious, which in the traditional sense, it is and it can be. But when you start thinking about the new ways of applying technologies such as Internet of Things, blockchain, the ways of using tech in a way for automation, robotics, drone, in many ways could really transform the sector in such a way where it becomes more efficient and therefore can lead to a better outcome. And not just on the farm, but off farm, where you can bring in e-commerce platform in many countries, not just China and Indonesia, but Africa also, in several cases where the connection of farms to the consumers is more direct and cutting out some of the intermediaries that are inefficient, but also using the digital platform like mobile apps, super apps, where they already have these ability to use digital technology in the way they transact with digital money, but also in the way they consume e-commerce platform, but also the way they now use the data to tailor their needs and the way they buy food online. And especially during COVID, you see many of the e-commerce thrive because the physical presence was a lot harder or at risk. So the shift towards the digital platform gives the young innovators a chance to also apply the technology savviness to figure out how do they really help smallholder farmers particularly be able to connect to the broader ecosystem and strike greater partnership with the big players in the ecosystem who are in the food and beverages space. So I think the agriculture sector is ready for disruptions with the young innovators to come forward. And we wanted to encourage more of that, not just from a data hackathon perspective, but creating the kind of enabler funds and also support to create the runways so that they could thrive and scale up to become future leaders in the space. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Leslie. We only have about 4 minutes left, just as a time check. So I'm going to ask each of you a final question. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to keep it tight. But for this final question is, what's the downside? And what's your vision of success for 2030? So what's the thing to keep in mind is the risk that everyone, we're not techno naifs in this conversation, but what's the risk and what's a vision of success? Maybe Bright and then Leslie.
So at this point, I'll ask David to do me the honors and share the 2 slides that I have. I think the biggest risk is really that we don't decolonize tech. I think that there is a strong possibility that this interconnectedness, if we're not conscious and deliberate about how we respond to it, leads to agglomeration of technology power in the global north. And it becomes very difficult in the global south to actually influence technology. So you think of mega platforms that become so powerful that they ride roughshod over the global south. And I've always had this view that, generically, the way you create change is to intersect knowledge, power, and passion. And if David could go to the next slide, I think in the context of technology, that dynamic really is about how the knowledge economy intersects with social justice and market power. Those 3 are so critical, and it's the intersection among the 3 that will ensure that we have a decolonized technology landscape. That kind of decolonized technology landscape will ensure that regardless of where innovators are, and Leslie made an important critical point, removing inefficient intermediaries. That is the whole point. Transmediaries figure out where you don't need intermediaries in the network and remove them out. And I think some of the inefficient intermediation does not benefit the poor, the marginalized, and the weak, most of whom are in the global south. So that is the key risk that I think we should watch out for.
Leslie, over to you. Final words, risk and vision of success. 60 seconds.
I'll make a very quick plug. I'm contributing to a new piece with the Brookings Africa Growth Initiative. So stay tuned on that one. That will be coming up in 2022. We talk about data governance. Now, staying on and closing on a positive note, especially for the future trends. During COVID, we experienced how interconnected we are globally and how important it is that digital technology enable us to stay productive as we pivot from a physical presence to more digital platform. And investors and policymakers alike are now realizing the immense potential of new technology, climate adaptation and mitigation, and innovative solutions and business models that allow scaling up across many different sectors, not just agriculture, energy, manufacturing, transport, finance, digital financial services, all of the above. If we can somehow harness the power of all that to really deliver the positive outcome for a more equitable future for all, I think I'm an eternal optimist. So I look forward to partnering with many of these like-minded professionals to deliver these futures for all. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Leslie. And I'm sure my Brookings colleagues are grateful for the plug, and we'll look forward to that contribution next year. But also just want to thank all of you who have contributed to this conversation, both in the audience and of course, our amazing panelists and authors, Bright and Leslie, and of course, our co-editors, Izumi, or my co-editors, Izumi and Homi, and also all of our partners at JICA and all the amazing authors who have contributed so much to this collective volume. Again, it's available. And peer reviewers, thank you, exactly. Many peer reviewers contributed so much as well. So this is a massive team effort, including the communications team and everyone else who enabled us to come together today. Thanks to Shrujana Kanal and David Batchek and the full Brookings communications team for making this possible. And again, the chapters are online and available, freely downloadable. And we hope that this contributes to the conversation in a way that actually not just understands the breakthroughs better, but helps contribute to them happening in a better, faster, smarter, and more inclusive way. So huge thanks to everyone. And with that, we'll adjourn and look forward to seeing you in the next digital connection.